There exists a borderless realm, an aspect of existence without boundaries or restrictions of any kind, one which exists beyond our concepts, beyond all dimensional restrictions, beyond even the conceptual restraints suggested herein. This is a map, unlike most maps, not intended to show you where you're going, but rather where you came from, and at some point must return to. Not so complex as it might seem to some. Instead, a simple truth we will continue to deny. All things come from somewhere. No thing can come from nothing. And that thing we all come from is the source. The source is consciousness. The ability to conceive, imagine, create, and experience. It could be conceded that this is all one really needs to know. The sum total of the simplest and therefore most genuine truth, an honest truth, rooted in mysticism? No, but in reason. No special knowledge, experience, or ability is required. Take a moment to experience that. It's just the truth. You need no stories or backgrounds or anything of the kind. You just have to know it and understand it. That's it. Yeah. The implications of this ultimate reality. You are consciousness. You are. You are consciousness. All things are consciousness. There's nothing more and nothing less. Things are a little more than ideals. They're projections of consciousness, manifestations of source. Reality, as we perceive it, is more or less a meditation, a dream, an illusion. Ultimately, whether that is delusion, fantasy, or even nightmare, is all just a matter of how one perceives the experience. In the end, as in the beginning, we are all one. All of existence, all reality, one. And still, we are yet to depart from reason. This is but the simple truth. But we'll get a little metaphysical now. Not spiritual or certainly not mystical. We'll save the storytelling for later. For now, let's talk a bit structure. In front of you is a map, a simplified representation of the many realities, dimensional layers descending from the source in a single direction. One continuous branch of an inverse skill tree, wherein each reality is named for the dimensions of freedom present therein. Rather than the lack or the number of dimensional restrictions. Restrictions which define the very nature of each realm, where each lesser reality enveloped within another is point of origin. Apparent reality, capable of spawning many others of the lesser kind. That is a point of perspective. That is you standing over yourself, over all creation, looking at that map, looking down into that dissension, that incarnation, everything existing within you, and within each layer, every layer after it. Anyway, try and glimpse the big picture of that. Forget about the map for a second in its isolation. And think about the map as the universal skill tree, the skill tree of creation. Okay? And think of it as a web. But we're no longer on the two-dimensional plane, regardless of the depth that the illusion of the map tries to portray of you looking inward. Think three-dimensional, spherical. There is a web that branches out in all directions. Okay? And that web is all of the possible routes for manifestation of consciousness, for incarnation, for query, right? To question. The question is to answer. To question is to answer. Every question leads to another question. Until it doesn't. And there's your source. But every one of those branches, no matter how much they diverge in, what direction they diverge, and this is a web that is a sphere of webs, the center at its core. So this is almost an inverse construct in and of itself, as it appears as if all of creation branches out. And from the side of creation, it does appear that way, because again, we're all source. The source is the soul. There is one soul, and we all share it. We have our own spirits, our own ego, but the source is soul. Okay? Like I said, metaphysical. So, the source is soul, and we all share that soul, being that we are all at our core, the source. So we are all projections of consciousness within consciousness. And though it looks as if, from a super macro perspective, as we are suddenly one of many, it looks as if all of creation is branching out from the source. However, nothing exists except consciousness. Nothing exists outside of consciousness. Okay? To imply that it does is to imply that there indeed is a thing that you could call nothing. There has to be a boundary between places of reality um, where there's nothing. That, and in someone's imagination, you could still cross that nothingness to the other reality. That's an absurdity. That's a rational absurdity. Um, Therefore, to its ultimate conclusions, you don't even get a question, you get a non-answer, right? And so you then have to understand that there still isn't any such thing as nothing. Nothing just doesn't exist. It can't exist, and therefore there always has to be a base layer, something. The base layer is something. Okay, is where the delusion that something exists outside actually comes from, but it's also the limit of reality is also a cold hard fact that something always had to exist. There's no such thing as nothing, and within the something, everything else must exist because there's the only thing you can draw from. We ultimately are all energy. All things are energy, and we can only draw from the base root of energy, consciousness, the source. Okay? So the experience is branching out, but it's branching out the same way you learn and understand yourself, by digging in deeper, right? Bring order and structure to your mind, to your heart, to your perspective, right? Because in reality, our lives are stitched together moments of perspective, right? And we sometimes float between perspective. We sometimes completely shift perspective. We sometimes lose perspective in a sense. We become drowned in. We become drowned in possibilities. We become drowned in the lack of answers, in the depth of our own ignorance, right? And when we become drowned in perspective, you could say we lose perspective when we lose perspective, right? All you have to do to move forward is to let go. Let go and let be, right? You are. Let be. Be. Right? Stop the desires. Stop the plans and machinations. Stop the fear. Stop being confused. Stop being bound by your own madness, right? Because even confusion is a type of temporary insanity, right? You don't have to be bound by that. And, I'm talking to everybody right now. To you, to them, to everybody. Stop being in bondage to your insanity. And just wake up.